Great innovation stories make change possible. Each week on the Innovation Storytellers podcast, I invite innovation leaders to share how they overcame the obstacles to introduce breakthrough ideas to the world through the power of story. I'm featuring guests from Tesla, TD Ameritrade, Corning, Cisco, Bloomberg, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can tell a more effective innovation story and change the future for the better. Hey everybody, it's Susan Linner. I'm your host with Innovation Storytellers. And today we are talking about the health, not just of you, but in the beautiful buildings that you go to work in every day. The environmental impacts of what's going on with our health in those buildings and why it actually matters. It's been quite an innovation cycle to get us to think about our health, not just at home or in the outdoors, but at work. And so that's why I'm so excited to have Joanna Frank here with me today. She is the president and CEO of the Center for Active Design, where she advances design and development practices to foster healthy and engaged communities. The Center for Active Design is the operator of Fitwell, a unique building certification that positively impacts occupant health and productivity through an integrated approach to workplace design and operations. Fitwell's development was led by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, we know it as the CDC, and the General Services Administration. And prior to launching CfAD, Ms. Frank worked for the City of New York during the Bloomberg administration, where her positions included the Director of Active Design and the Director of the NYC Fresh program. And before working for the city, Ms. Frank was a partner at Bright City Development, where she was responsible for the Affordable Workforce Housing Council and mixed-use residential buildings using sustainable design criteria. I'm so excited that she's able to join us here today. She is also a member of the National Council of State Housing Agencies Advisory Group on financing healthier, affordable housing, as well as being an active partner in ULI's Building Healthy Places initiative. So I hope I got all of that right, because that is a lot of a lifetime of trying to get us to think about where we work and live and play as being environments for promoting health. So Joanna, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome.
Thank you.
I wanted to start off with a top-of-line question. What don't we know about the places where we live and work and how it impacts our health? Like how blind are we as tenants or as workers to our health and the buildings that impact our health?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So where you live, where you work, the neighborhoods that they're within is having a measurable impact on all aspects of your health. So your physical health, your mental health, social health, which means the level that you trust one another, which is very important, obviously. So all of those aspects of your health and obviously your life expectancy, which, you know, they all build towards life expectancy, are impacted by the design and the operation of the buildings that we live and work in. And people don't know that. So whether you know it or not, it is affecting your life and it is affecting your health outcomes. So there's kind of a little saying that people use, and that is that your zip code has a greater impact on your health than your genetic code. And I think that that's a really great way of putting it together in a way that folks are like, aha, they have an aha moment. And it's true. So your environment, your physical environment is impacting your health. So what we really work to do is, how do you optimize that environment using the incredible global research base that exists?
Yeah. So Joanna, how did you even get into this line of work? What was your why in researching and getting involved in this?
Yeah, no, it's a circuitous story. I guess they always are. So I was supposed to study medicine like any, good 18-year-old girl who's good at science, right? Obviously, you're supposed to study medicine, and I'm British, so you actually start that at 18. So I persuaded my parents to let me go to art school for a year because that was really my passion. Science was never my passion in that way. So I went to art school. And then I became an architect. So that wasn't obviously the predestined route that I was supposed to follow. But it's funny how it's all come back together again, in that I am very curious. I love science. I actually love reading academic papers, even if I only understand half of them. So there's kind of that intellectual curiosity around science. But my passion is building buildings. And I was a real estate developer in a past life before all of this started. So I had my own real estate company. We were building buildings with a partner. And then the crash happened, 2008, which wasn't a great year to have a fledgling real estate company. We managed to keep going. It's an understatement. We kept going till 2010, and then I was invited to join the Bloomberg administration, and that was the kind of the game changer. So I was following a pretty linear path as far as building buildings, designing buildings until that point. And then obviously Michael Bloomberg, very data-driven decision maker. And so I was absorbed into that orbit and really introduced to the idea that we can bring data, we can bring scientific research into decision making of every facet of our decision making. And so I headed up a couple of programs during the Bloomberg administration that you mentioned, the Fresh program, which was the grocery store program. So that was bringing grocery stores into underserved neighborhoods using tax credits and changes in zoning. So basically doing deals with the real estate industry, bringing in the grocery industry, and making it all work for everybody financially and resulting obviously.
Because I think a lot of people still are not aware of the food deserts that exist in urban areas, right? How difficult it is to get a full service supermarket into lower income parts of cities.
Absolutely. And that was a great example to me of how you could leverage data. So we were able to pull all kinds of really interesting data about the spending patterns of people within low income neighborhoods and the amount of dollars that they were spending on food, but they were having to leave the immediate neighborhood in order to spend those dollars because there was nowhere to buy food within the neighborhood. And then use that data to show a grocery store that there is enough income and there are enough dollars being spent on food to support a full-size grocery store. So that was an aha moment for me. And I loved it. I love math, right? I love numbers. So that was great. And I like to sell things. So it's nice when you can use your numbers to sell. So that was kind of the first piece that I did. And then I quickly moved on to running the active design program. And that's really what I'm doing today. It's a continuation of this work. And that was really, how do we work with the public health professionals and the amazing research that has come out of public health over the last 100 years. So this is not new, right? This is what I mean about there is a lot of knowledge. Our built environment we know is impacting our health, even if we don't know it. And I didn't know it 10 years ago. So working with the health department to take all of that research and translate it into practical, very important, practical design and operational strategies that could be used throughout the portfolio of assets of New York City. So how can we use this information to influence the way that infrastructure was being designed and investment was being prioritized within neighborhoods, the way that streets were designed and streetscapes and planting trees and investing in local parks. And then on the building front, how do we ensure that public buildings are being optimized for people? Which I know it sounds so simple, but it isn't the way that we design our buildings. So how do you create
optimized for, out of curiosity, if not for people, who are they optimized for?
So this is kind of a vague concept of a user that it needs to function in a certain way. So if it's a library, it's functioning in order to have a good flow of people in order to get them to the stacks that you want them to and to check out. And so we as architects think about flows, we think about light, but we're thinking about it from a building perspective. We aren't thinking about it from the people's perspective. Like, how do I create a building or an environment? Really, it doesn't have to be a building, where I'm focusing primarily on the person and making that the optimizing it for people. It's such a simple shift, but it is actually fundamental because it changes the way that you perceive spaces and what you prioritize. So this was the active design program, was really translating public health research into these practical implementable strategies that could be used across multifamily housing, public buildings, public spaces, infrastructure. And then we continued that work as the Center for Active Design. So at the end of the Bloomberg administration, there was a lot of demand for this work. The city of New York had put out a set of guidelines called the Active Design Guidelines, which have now been downloaded by 160 countries, which is kind of crazy. So that was important because it was really the first time a lot of people had been exposed to the idea that design and their built environment is impacting their health. And there really wasn't very much demand for it 10 years ago. So that was another really interesting piece of the puzzle. And so this is what we've been doing ever since. We've been looking at how do you take all of the information and knowledge from public health professionals and how do you translate it in order to bring about change and innovation in real estate practice, whether it's in investing in real estate, whether it's the ownership of real estate or the design of our buildings and our built environment. So this is what we do. We translate between these two professions.
So what's the innovation and what's the challenge of getting this shift? So give us like the before and after picture of what happens in the innovation you're trying to create in our buildings and our health.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's dramatically changed as far as what the challenges are from pre and post COVID or whatever state we're in with COVID at this point. So pre-COVID, I would say, I know that there really wasn't very much demand coming from individuals. So one of the biggest challenges was really to make a business case for why, as the owner of real estate, you should be optimizing the health of your occupants when your occupants aren't valuing it and aren't demanding it. So we could make an academic argument. I could make a financial argument that it's going to increase the return on investment of your portfolio, but they aren't feeling the demand. So tenants aren't coming to them. This is pre-COVID, saying you have to create a healthy workplace. Individuals on the residential side weren't actively asking for health when they were looking for apartments. Now, they were asking for the individual strategies, which we know fit under health. So they were saying, what is the location of my building? Is it close to transit? Does it have outdoor space? All of those things are very high on everyone's list of what they're looking for in somewhere to live, but they aren't then associating that with, I'm asking for these things because they impact my physical health and my mental health. They do, but people weren't asking for it. So one of the big challenges was... This
is a challenge of just Americans thinking about their own mental health to begin with, right? I mean, it's so deprioritized that you feel like, oh, I'd like sunshine, but you don't realize because it makes me feel good, because it contributes to the serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin getting released in my brain. And when I don't have it, I get depressed.
Absolutely. No, I mean, so we weren't talking about mental health at all. And then it seems too simple. The idea that seeing green space, walking down a street and just, having a little smile with your neighbor, not even interacting necessarily, or sitting in a light-filled room with sunshine, the fact that they have a measurable impact on your mental health outcomes, it just feels too simple. People are like, it's not complicated enough. I need something that's shinier than that. But actually, it is that simple. Social isolation, which we've all obviously been experiencing during COVID, is as detrimental to your health as smoking and physical inactivity. So the three leading causes of preventable death are smoking, physical inactivity, and social isolation. And guess what, folks? We have just been incredibly socially isolated because of COVID. But our physical environment also really determines how isolated we are. So if you are living and working in a car-centric environment, if you just think about your day-to-day routines, and that's really what we're talking about here, right? How do we change our daily routines, our daily behaviors? I'm going from my house into my garage, getting into my car, driving it to an underground car park, and then you're taking the lift up to your office space. You haven't seen anybody in that process. And you've also been stressed because driving is inherently stressful. So you're more isolated than you would have been if you had taken public transport or walked. So again, even just like really casual interactions with people actually feed us as social creatures. And we are social creatures. You may think you're a loner, but as a species, we are social. Our brains think in a way that is social. We are not individual in our thinking. We're really, it's fascinating.
Wow. And so what's the challenge of getting these certifications, A, adopted, and B, what kind of pushback did you get from people who said, no one wants this, it's just one more hurdle, why are we even doing this? People seek out the office or the apartment that they want, and so be it.
Yeah. So we actually started by going to the folks that invest in real estate. So having been a real estate developer, I am very well aware that many of the decisions that are made around the fundamental location and design and operation of a building are actually determined by the underwriting criteria that are being set by whomever is investing in that property. So those are the folks that really hold the power. So what we did was really prioritize, how do we go to the institutional investors, the pension plans, those folks, and how do we make the argument that it is in their financial best interest to prioritize the health of the occupants in the assets that they are investing in. And really, we're making a risk argument when it comes to that, right? So we're saying you are going to see more stable tenants, you're going to see high levels of occupancy, you're going to be able to attract your Class A tenants, i.e., you're going to make more money from your real estate if you prioritize the health of the individuals that are coming into those buildings. So that's kind of where we started. And that was really because of my perspective as a real estate developer. I think from the outside, everybody thinks that developers have all this power. And yes, they have a certain amount of power, but the money that they need to attract really has more power. So that's where we went. They also, of course, control the market. So if you work with 5 pension plans, just think how many buildings they invest in. So it's as a small team, it was really expedient for us to go up to the top of the food chain, basically. So the pushback that we always get, always today, as we always have, is how does this impact the return on my investment? Because as a real estate owner or developer, or investor, your fiduciary responsibility is to maximize the return on investment. So we have to make a business case for health. We always have. The business case has changed because of COVID, but we have always had to make the business case. And we have to understand what is the motivation of our clients and how can we fit health into their existing motivation, right? We are not going to change demand and we're not going to change their motivation. So we have to be sophisticated enough to understand how they are assessed as far as their success is concerned and make our argument fit into this is going to make you more successful based on the existing criteria that are used to really define success for you as an industry. So that's what we've been doing. So rather than saying you should care about health, we're saying we care about what you care about. And by promoting health, we are going to make you more successful.
So is there what are the metrics that you're sharing with some of these landlords or developers about the positive outcomes of Fitwel?
Sure. So kind of individual strategies, all of them have an amazing evidence base behind them. So the Fitwel standard, which we use to define a healthy building, has 5,600 peer-reviewed, published research articles behind it. So these are academic research papers that have been translated and reviewed and are actually used in order to identify the strategies to start with and then weight the strategies. So we're able to say, because the evidence base is so large, we're able to say that being in a highly walkable neighborhood has a relatively higher impact on your health and these specific aspects of your health than another strategy, like having operable blinds in your office. They both impact health. There's a research base behind it. We know that in the case of a walkable neighborhood, it's impacting your physical health. It's impacting your mental health, which you may not realize is also an equity issue. And all of those are supported by the evidence base. In the case of operable blinds, it's actually impacting your mental health because you're able to control your environment, which is very important for us. But one has a greater impact than the other. So what we're able to say, every strategy has a different impact on health. And then many of those impacts on health impact productivity. So the way that we're able to talk about a business case for individual strategists is looking at the evidence base. Another kind of stat to throw out there is that depressive symptoms were already the number one cause of disability globally. So there was already...
Say that again so people really hear that.
Depressive symptoms were the number one cause of disability globally before COVID. There hasn't been a new study since COVID, but I'm here to tell you it's going to be even worse now because we have seen obviously a huge amount of risk factors for mental health because of COVID, stress and social isolation that we've just talked about. So there was already a very substantial argument to make about promoting mental health and reducing the risks of depression using your built environment, correlating with a very substantial dollar figure. And then, so that's kind of the overall mental health piece. And then there are other strategies that you can look at individually around productivity as well. So another kind of good one, we talked about sitting in a light-filled space. So if you are in a space that has good quality natural light, that person at a public health level, sort of population level, will actually have 16 hours a year less sick leave than somebody sitting in a poorly lit desk space. So 16 hours of work, basically, is attributed to being in a light-filled desk. So,
that's
as
2
a company,
days.
as a company, you start to, times that by the number of employees, and you can see how that has a significant impact on productivity. Another piece of the equation, and a very strong argument that we've been making, is around employee attraction and retention. So we've been in a really tight labor market for actually quite a long time, kind of either side of COVID. And where we see the kind of the most competition for talent is in tech industry and the finance industry, those kind of industries. And we know that 78% of their workforce is now demanding healthy environments when it comes to where they work. And it's actually part of their decision making. 78%, it's actually of the millennial generation, demand and want a healthy workplace. So it's one of the key factors in choosing where they work and whether they stay at that company. So these numbers really resonate with employees. So these are the kind of motivations that as an employee, you have a lot of power because of the tight labor market. And then as an employer, you are obviously more typically the tenant in a building. So then you pass on that demand to the building owner and say, in order for my company to be successful, I have to be able to demonstrate to my employees how we're promoting their health. They're a very sophisticated generation when it comes to data. We need to demonstrate it. We can't just say this is a healthy building. You have to show that this is a healthy building. So that obviously that demand is passing on to the building owner. And that is affecting their occupancy and their tenant stability. And that's why it's a risk as far as investors are concerned. Because if you as a building owner can't demonstrate how your building is promoting health, you are going to have a harder time attracting your tenants, keeping the tenants. You're going to lose them to buildings that are able to demonstrate how they're promoting health.
Wow. And I mean, we're hearing it from so many angles, the power of the labor market to dictate your stance on climate change, to dictate your stance on, pro-choice or pro-life, to, DE&I and inclusion related things. It really is a shift of kind of grassroots labor saying, this is what we demand, or I won't work here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that has changed in the last 10 years. So as I said, when we started this 10 years ago, individuals were not demanding this. In fact, we were getting rebuked and people didn't believe us. So we've gone from individuals not believing that their built environment impacted their health to, in a decade, to individuals now demanding that their environments be optimized for their health, for people's health. That's a huge shift in demand for a single decade. And obviously that has been accelerated because of COVID. It was actually starting pre-COVID, especially in the kind of the tech industry. So that demand we were already seeing an uptick. We weren't seeing it on the residential side before COVID. Now we're seeing it throughout the market, except actually in the industrial space. And we really want to work with the industrial workforce to empower them to demand health. We're seeing the negative consequences of environments that aren't health promoting when it comes to industrial, but we aren't seeing the demand from the individuals being met by those spaces at the moment. So that's an area for us of a kind of a longer term focus that we really want to put these two pieces together.
Yeah, and it's probably some of the most disenfranchised individuals, right, who need to advocate for themselves in this space and don't really have a lot of power.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the power they have is to leave. And so in the industrial sector saw a 60% turnover last year, which isn't sustainable. So if you have, a labor market, which is only X number of people, and you're churning through your labor market that quickly, you are actually going to run out of employees at some point. And so that's one of the kind of key motivators that we are looking to leverage when it comes to creating environments that just have simple things like natural light and break rooms and access to outside and enough bathrooms. These are the kind of things that we are really looking to ensure that all industrial properties have those basic needs met, because it will result in lower levels of stress and lower levels of accidents. Actually, a lot of research around how to minimize accidents. Yeah. So but it's good in that individuals are now, I think, empowered. They have the information to hand.
Yeah. I'm thinking about, during this time, during COVID, we just saw so much. I mean, the data really is in now, right? That the greatest amount of COVID spread, hospitalizations and death happened among people who were really on the front lines of being first responders who were not necessarily in protective environments like in a hospital. So these are first responders who are the cashiers in our drugstores and running the subways and Uber and Lyft drivers, right? And taxi drivers who could not say no and not to mention, meat production was suddenly a first responder job, right? That these were, and yet we're still fighting for bathrooms, fresh air, and windows as part of that experience. Yeah,
absolutely. And I do think, we always come back to making an economic argument. So our mission is to bring about market transformation around health. So we are really looking at that kind of scale, because that is the scale we're talking about, right? If every building is impacting the health of its occupants, we need every building to be optimized for its occupants. So I think when it comes to the industrial sector, where we need to be making a strong argument is around supply chain, because that is the financial kind of, where everybody is focused at the moment. So just like on the on the commercial side of real estate and investment side, we're looking at environmental, social, and governance investing trends, ESG investing trends. I don't know whether you've chatted about those on previous podcasts. Oh, yes. So we have to demonstrate for investors how health is part of that ESG risk assessment. When it comes to the industrial, we have to, like I said, we always have to understand what is driving the decision-making and how can we ensure that we're part of that decision-making. At whatever point a decision is being made, how are we part of that conversation, or how is health part of that conversation? So when it comes to industrial, we will be really looking at supply chain and how to demonstrate that having a healthier workforce and supporting the health of your workforce can directly benefit supply chain issues, if that's the thing that's really of top of mind for that sector at the moment.
Fascinating. And it's relevatory because there's so many things that we knew before COVID, but became so acute during this time that it's impossible to look away. And, some of us were able to work from home, but many of us were not. And that shift in providing for ensuring a safe workplace for people who cannot work from home is a really big deal. If we want to ensure the health and safety of the whole country, it becomes like a much broader issue. So the innovation starts almost always with a mindset shift. And it seems like part of the work that you're doing, Joanna, is actually pushing a mindset shift within the corporate world as well. Is that the hardest part of the equation?
So we work with tenants as well. So we work with folks like Meta and Microsoft, large employers. So it isn't just
top shops like Facebook.
So it isn't. It's really this shift in thinking that a building is really here to serve people, and how do you think about creating the optimum environment for a person? So it doesn't have to be within that box, right? It can be outside the box. It can be getting to the box. But how do we really shift our focus of our built environment so that we are really creating people-centric, human-centric experiences and environments, rather than saying, how can I make the best box? It's like, no, it doesn't matter about making the best box. It's about how do I create the best environment for people, which includes the box, that is the building, but it also includes how I'm traveling from the box I live in to the box I work in, when I'm walking around, that the spaces. So it's really from a people perspective. So you're looking at a 24-hour cycle, and you're looking at people's daily routines and what affects their behaviors, because their behavior is affecting their health outcomes. So if you're walking, that's obviously great as far as physical activity and mental health. And as I said, it's an equity issue also, because we see disparities in the built environment that are directly correlated to income as well. And what we see is maintenance. So we haven't talked about maintenance, but maintenance was kind of a revelation to me, because we had been looking at physical environments, we've been looking at buildings and neighborhoods, but we hadn't been thinking of the operational side as much in the first kind of few years of the work we were doing. And it was actually working with the Parks Department down in Philadelphia, where they were like, oh my gosh, you have to look at maintenance, because we see that well-maintained parks are just so much more popular and actually remain better maintained. So there's something happening that if you present someone with an environment that has no litter, people are less likely to increase the amount of litter. If the place already has a lot of litter, a lot of trash, then they're going to add to that trash. So we did actually some original research with UC Berkeley, with some researchers out there, and found that the maintenance, how well maintained a building is or a space is, has a direct relationship to people's levels of trust. And so why that is so important is I have to trust you in order to walk down the street. So if I don't feel safe and I don't trust my neighbors, I'm less likely to walk down the street, because I don't, that's safety. And if I'm seeing all of this kind of deteriorated public realm, where I'm seeing graffiti and I'm seeing trash and lots of buildings that are derelict, right, that is creating a stress response in me. And I'm thinking, I'm not safe, I don't want to walk down here. And that's across the whole population. So I think we really started to look at maintenance about 5 years ago. And there's some really interesting research on it, but we've been talking about having lots of greenery in buildings and outside buildings. What we see with greenery is it's very positive when it comes to trust if it's well maintained, but it's actually twice as negative if it's poorly maintained. So it's plus 5% increase in trust if it's well maintained, and a negative 11 if it's poorly maintained. So as creatures, as beings, we are assessing our risk, we are feeling it based on what we're seeing. And that has become so important during COVID, because a lot of the strategies that buildings can use in order to reduce the risk of the transmission of any respiratory disease is really looking at their filtration system or the amount of fresh air that they're bringing into a building. And these are strategies that we can't see as individuals. So I have to decide if I trust you based on what I do experience. And so that level of maintenance is one of the key ways that I'm deciding as an individual if I trust you, if I trust this building, if I feel safe. And maintenance is definitely an equity issue. And then we also see differences in the age of population as far as how they respond to levels of maintenance. And teenage girls and older adults are actually the most impacted by signs of deterioration as far as their trust levels are concerned.
Teenage girls.
Teenage girls.
Well, they're an incredibly vulnerable part of the population, right? So it would make sense. It feels like it would make sense.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But so what that means for our daily habits is if I don't trust my neighbors, I'm not going to get as much physical activity. I'm going to become shut into my apartment if I'm an older adult, because now I don't feel safe on the streets. And that's really bad, because that exacerbates social isolation, which will shorten your life expectancy. So all of these things are related. And that to me is one of the exciting things, is that this is a system. But actually that makes it really interesting, because any one thing you do can impact health. You don't have to do it in a particular order, which makes it a lot more flexible and accessible, that every building, old, new, in any location, serving any purpose, can be optimized to promote health. And it isn't like a rigid set of strategies. You can really kind of look at, how do I optimize my building in a way that's unique and uniquely responding to the people in the building.
Joanna, this has just been such a fascinating conversation. I think probably most of us are not thinking about how to do this or how we should do this in our buildings as business owners, or perhaps the places that we go to work every day, and looking around our environment and asking the question, is this really making me feel happy and healthy? So thank you for shining a light on this. I would like to ask you a couple of questions as a fellow innovator. So what do you think is the greatest innovation of all time?
Wow.
Give us your top three if you prefer.
Greatest innovation of all time. I would say any one of the kind of communication advances that we've had. I actually just listened to a great podcast called The Leap Years by Stephen Fry, and he kind of goes through all the innovation around communication. So I think, whether it was cave paintings or the press to get written word out, I think any invention that allows us to spread knowledge, to me, is exciting. As someone who communicates for a living, just like you do. So, I think for me, those are some of the greatest innovations, because we as creatures are social, right? We want to know what's going on, and we want to communicate with each other. So I would put any of those innovations around communication.
Okay. And if you could join any innovation team in human history, what would it be?
Wow. I love the Romans. I'm like, really, I love the baths and the underground heating systems that they designed. I think they were incredible builders. So as someone who is at heart a builder, I would like to join a Roman team. Never mind that I'm a woman and I wouldn't be allowed, I'm sure. But anyway, if we could change a lot of other things about the Roman Empire, I would like to be part of the innovation around their construction. I mean, their use of concrete. I could really geek out on all of these things.
Oh, fantastic. And our last question is, what's an innovation that you would like to see in the world? Something that drives you absolutely crazy today that you'd like to see fixed, or something that you just would love to see in the world?
Oh my gosh. Can we do something about our ability to distinguish truth from fiction?
Oh, fake news.
Could somebody innovate around that?
Oh, as a communicator, this is such a challenge, right? Because we know that it's really, that lies spread faster than truth, that people are more attracted to spreading disinformation than they are actual information. So it's a challenge of the human brain, because we enjoy all of those negative attributes of news and information so much.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I was saying earlier, it's actually one of our biggest challenges, in that a lot of the things that impact health the most seem so normal and non-innovative that it's hard to convince people that they're actually having the greatest impact on your health, and that we would much prefer to have shiny solutions to kind of our health crisis. But the solutions that are the most effective are not the shiny ones. They're the ones that are all around us. So yes, we're magpies, aren't we? We like shiny solutions, and sticking to the research, is it's empowering, but it's also limiting, because you're sticking to the research. So you can't make stuff up.
So yes, if we could eliminate that. And now, we're moving into an era of deep fakes, so the ability to even create fake news from real news is going to be upon us too. So that's serious stuff. Well, Joanna, thank you so much for being on the show. How can people get in contact with you?
Sure. So everything we do, we actually put on our website, so fitwel.org, and they can reach out to me through that. Absolutely. Because we're both a nonprofit and a for-profit. We put everything out for free because, right, we want market transformation. We can't do it on our own, folks. So yeah, that's the best way to find us. Obviously, we're on Twitter and so on as well, but we will respond if you get in touch with us through our website. And we have a lot of exciting stuff coming up. We actually have a new report coming up in the next couple of weeks that for the first time is going to make a direct positive correlation, to use my research words, between promoting health and tenant satisfaction, and something that real estate call net promoter scores, which is basically your willingness to recommend a property to your friends and peers. So that's going to be the next big jump for us, because this is something that, obviously, tying back to motivation, it's essential that we can demonstrate. So that will be coming out in just a couple of weeks, and folks will be able to download that also off the website.
Fantastic. Joanna Frank, thank you so much for joining me on Innovation Storytellers today. And we will certainly be thinking about our health each time we step into a building, thanks to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now you might be asking, Susan, why innovation storytelling? Well, the truth is that an innovation story told well not only breaks down communication barriers so you can drive change and new growth, but it also helps other people remember and champion your work. And it propels your best ideas forward faster to secure you the runway, resources, and recognition you so richly deserve. In other words, stories are memory-making devices that significantly reduce the time it takes for you and your innovation to be understood. But like many leaders, you probably never got the memo that storytelling skills would be central to your success. Well, I've got some good news for you. It's not too late, because I've got you covered. Whether you need an expert to come and speak to your innovation leaders, you need training in the art and method of innovation storytelling, or you just need the support and guidance of a consultant who can get you where you want to go in less time, visit www.susanlinder.com today to learn more and to set up a call to discuss your needs. I'm so looking forward to connecting with you and to helping you tell a great innovation story. If you like what you heard so far, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode. And leave us a comment. Tell us what you think of this episode. We'd love to hear from you. And if you didn't like what you've heard, just forget everything I've said.